Hi guys, I'm Neil Curtis from neilcurtis.me, and today we're going to make a nice questionnaire kind of survey form for your website using Gravity Forms. And here is the first page of our form, and it's going to be a multi-page. So there's going to be 2 pages to this form. The first page is just going to request simple general details such as first name, second name, email address and your age. Then if you click next, we'll go on to the next form that will have some questions with a multiple choice answers or survey results. So this is what we're going to do, and we're going to style this because when you first input your Gravity Forms, as you probably know if you use Gravity Forms, it won't look anything like this. So we're going to create the form and then style it so it looks like this. And I'll just fill in this form quickly with my details. And we'll click next. And then here we have our survey. So what it is it's got 4 questions, and the first question is larger text, and we've got 3 choices. We've got bad, okay, good, and these are just quickly made up questions. Of course yours will be better, and you could have a scale of 0 to 10 where you choose one, or different words that you can choose. But here we've just got bad, okay, good for a quick test, and when you hover over them they change colour. And when you select one, you see we've got the first question and we've got 3 other questions, and these questions are smaller font and you haven't got an option because you need to work through them in order. So we'll just pick good. You see as soon as we select one, the one below opens up, is a large writing, and now you can choose. So we go okay, okay, and then good. So you answer these in order, and this is using conditional logic which is built into Gravity Forms. I'll show you how to do this, which lets these different fields expand when you choose one of the options above. Now you see we've got this previous or submit buttons, so we can go back, we can do previous and then change some information here, or if we're done we click submit. And these buttons, the size and formatting and the hover effects are all custom styling, and I'll show you how to do this. So we'll click submit, and it just takes us through to a thank you page. So it's this form that we're going to create now from scratch. Okay, so we're going to start off, we're going to create a brand new form. So I'll go into the dashboard of the WordPress site, and if you have Gravity Forms installed you will have forms here. And the first thing I want to mention quickly is if we go into settings, I always have to have it as output CSS set to no and output HTML5 set to yes, because sometimes it's hard to style and format Gravity Forms if these are left the other way around. So just do that and save your settings. Then we go forms. We could have clicked new forms there, but then we'll add a new form and we'll just call this one questionnaire. And we get to the default page here of Gravity Forms. It's got nothing in it, so these are just instructions how to use it, which you won't read because I'll show you now. So what I want to do, if you remember, on the first page, so we've got 2 pages, one's got some questions and one's got some general input fields. So we want to put a name, first and last name, and we could use an advanced field here as name, but I always like to use single line text fields and then style these myself. So we're going to click this twice and have 2 single line text fields. And then I want an email field, and I could use another single line text field, but this time I am going to use an advanced field and choose email because this recognizes valid email addresses. So if someone doesn't put one in, it'll come up as an error. So I'll click email here. And then finally we want a select field where people can select the age range. So here this will be a drop down list. So those are our 4 fields, and I'll just click on this top one here and I'll call it first name, and this is going to be a required field. Second name, also a required field. Email, which we'll leave, but I'll make this a required field. And then finally, age. This is also a required field. And in age, we've got some choices because it's going to be a drop-down list. And then the first one, I'm just going to say, and you'll see in a minute, the first box that shows in this field will be select your age range, because this is what will show up in the input box. Then we'll have the age ranges, so it'll be 16 or below, and then 17 to 24. Add a couple more boxes, 25 to 40, 41 to 65, and then 66 or above. These will be our options. So I'll just click update to save this form, and then I need to create a new page and then embed this form in the page. So I'll open this in a new tab. Here's our page. I'll make it full width, and I'm using the Genesis framework here, so I've got these options to select the layout. And then if you've got Gravity Forms installed, you will see this add a form tab. So I'll click that. I don't want to show description or title. Then we'll just select this questionnaire form we just set up and insert it in here. So you'll see it's got an ID of 10, which you can also see up here. And this is important for the styling, which I'll come to in a bit. So we've embedded this form. I'll just publish this page. And if we have a look at it, you'll see here's our form. And as I mentioned at the start, it's not styled at all like we want it to be. It's just got these lists for width here. Here's our drop down. And you see what I meant by the drop down. So it's got age, and then the first thing in here it says select your age range. So then you select from this list. That's why we put that in there. Right. The first thing I noticed is we've got these bullets here, because the way Gravity Form works, I put in a list. So it puts a bullet in because it's taking some default styling from the theme I'm using, and I'm using the Metro Pro theme here, which is a Genesis theme from StudioPress. You may or may not have this styling here with these bullets, and this comes when you select the option turn the CSS off or no to the CSS in the settings that we did at the beginning, and it shows these here. So the first thing we'll do is get rid of these by inputting a bit of code. So we go back into our dashboard, and I'm going to open up my CSS editor. So we go to Appearance and Editor, and I'm going to right click and open it again in a new tab. So here's our CSS style sheet for this theme. So I'm going to go right down to the bottom here, and then I'm going to input some styling code here to get rid of that default styling. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put a little comment here just so I know what this code is. Remove default styling from Gravity Forms. So I'll do that. Okay, so now we can put some styling. I'm just going to paste in some code here, and then you can pause the video or look at the post on my website at www.neilcurtis.me to look at this code. So this is the code you need, and it basically just removes all the default settings from the Gravity Form, and it gets rid of these bullet points. So pause this here if you want to copy down this code. So I'm just going to update this style sheet, and then if I refresh our page now, you'll see those bullet points have disappeared, which is great. So now we need to start styling this. So what we want is this field to be a lot smaller, and this other name field to be the same width but float next to it. And below that we have the email and then the age and a formatted submit button. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So again, we need to go into our style sheet, and I'm just going to copy this comment here and then put a new comment below, just so it's nicely ordered. So if we come back to it, we know what we've done. Then this time we're going to style the form fields. So we need to target the individual fields here, and to do that we use this code here. So it's body, and I'm going to go hash g form underscore wrapper, and if I go underscore, then I put the ID of our form, and remember ours was 10. So if you go here into your form, you've got the ID here. So if you only have one form, your first ever form, it'll be ID of 1, but ours is 10 because we've created lots of forms in the past. So we're targeting this specific form, and then you go dot form underscore body, and then dot g form underscore fields, and then dot g field. And this is basically breaking down the different sections of the gravity form to get down to the specific thing we want to target, which is an individual field. Okay, so then we put in our styling. So I've got open and close curly brackets, and first thing is we want to reduce the width, and I'm going to have a width here of 280 pixels. So I'll just put width 280 pixels. And this is a nice size field for your website, but also if you look on a mobile device, it's a good pixel size to show up well on mobile devices too. So update this. Now if we refresh our page, hopefully these all shrink down, which you all do, so they're all a nice size now. So the next thing we need to do is float these left. So we want this second name to float here next to the first name. So we could do that now, and we can go back to our code, and this time write float left. Update our style sheet, refresh our page, and there we go, they're all floating left, but it's affecting all of these fields, which we don't want it to. We want this email and age to be down here, but we'll come to that in a minute. So we'll just focus on these first two, which are floating left, but they're tight against each other. We want a little gap now, so I'm going to put a margin right of 10 pixels just to push a bit of a gap here. So we go back in, and we're going to stay in the same section here, and it's going to go margin right, and then I'll go 10 pixels. And I'm going to leave it there, but after this may not do anything, but I just want to show you in case you come across this issue. See, nothing's happened, and I put the right code in and something should happen. And the reason is because somewhere in the gravity form settings there is some CSS code in there that's overwriting our formatting here. So we need to say this is the most important, this is the styling you should use for this particular area of the form. So to do that, we go exclamation mark and then the word important. And that just says, in this particular case, use this styling for the margin. And you'll see sometimes you need it and sometimes you don't, but you just need to see. If you think you've got the code right and it's not working, this may be the reason. So now there you go, it's pushed it a gap there, and there's a gap in all of them. Right, so that's those two taken care of, but we need to style these two differently. So we'll have a look at this email field, and what we can do is we can specifically target individual field here, and that is what we'll do. So if I go back into my form, you see if you hover over each of these, each one has their own ID number. So we've got the form ID here of 10, and then we've got individual field IDs. So this email field has an ID of 3, so we can target the specific field and do some specific formatting to it, which is what we'll do. So underneath here, I will do this. So it's body as before, but instead of going hash, I'm going to go .g form underscore. And I'm not going to put the ID of the form in now, because we'll do that in a minute. Then I go .g form underscore body, then .g form underscore fields, and then we come to the part that targets a specific field. So we go hash field underscore 10 for the form ID of 10, and underscore 3 for the ID of the individual email field, and .g field. And this should now target that specific element or specific field in the form. We'll do open and close curly brackets, and then we want it to float left like before. We want it to have a width of 280 pixels like the other ones, but I want it to clear left. So that means I don't want anything floating to the left of it. So I go clear left. Right, so this should now, I'll update that, this should now say it doesn't want anything floating to the left, so it goes down here. So if I refresh this page, there it goes, it's worked nicely. And this other field is floating left relative to this one, so the formatting and styling is still nice there, which is great. I feel that the email here words is too close to this field, so I want to put a bit of a margin there, so I can go in and we can go into our first one we did here, and I can go margin bottom to push the elements down at the bottom, and I'll say 15 pixels here. I may need the word important again, but we'll see. So I'm hoping now it's going to put a margin beneath each of these fields, so it'll push this one down a bit. To refresh, it hasn't done anything, so I'll just copy this important and I'll put it in here. There we go, push them down nicely. And you'll notice this submit button is over here. It's the wrong size, wrong format, and wrong color, and it needs to be down here as well. And also, this shouldn't be submit, it should be next, because this is supposed to be a multi-page form. So that's what we'll set up now. We'll set up the multi-page feature in Gravity Forms, and then I'll go and format this button. So go back into our form, and then if you see in our standard fields here, we've got a page break, and that's what we need. So I click that, and you'll see it's added this start paging, and beneath this it's got page break, and it's got end paging. So I need to put some stuff in between here for our second page, which we'll do in a minute. If you go into this first block here, we've got some options whether you want to show progress bar or steps at the top or none. I'm going to select none because this is only a 2-page form, so there's no point in having a progress bar. But if you've got several pages, you might want that. I'm going to select none. Okay, so that's that. And then first page, second page, update form. It's giving me a warning here saying I've got nothing in this second page here, so I'll go and add something in there quickly. So I'll just add I'll add a radio button field. That's what we're going to have in the next section, but we'll go and format that later. So I'm going to click radio button, and it's plonked that in there in between the second page. So I'm going to update my form now. If you go back here and refresh, you see that now says next rather than submit. So we'll target this next button now in our styling, and then we'll get it looking nice and in the right position. So we go into our code, let's copy this comment again so we can put another comment here just to keep it nice and neat, and then style the form buttons, because that's what we're doing. Right, so this is the next button. So we've got some special styling just for this next button, and it is body hash gform underscore wrapper, that the all center start, then underscore 10 because we're targeting form 10. And it's dot gform underscore body, and it's dot gform underscore page because it's pages, and underscore footer because this is called the footer area of the form, and it's dot gform underscore next because it's the next button underscore button. So that's it. That is targeting that specific next button on this particular form, which has an ID of 10. So we'll do our open and close curly brackets, and then this is our styling in here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is tell it to float left. So we'll type float left. Update it as always, and refresh it. And it hasn't floated all the way down here. So we need to say clear both because we don't want anything floating to the left and right of it, and then we'll bump it down here. Clear both. There it goes, it's gone down there, and it's got a nice bit of spacing here because remember these ones have already got a margin bottom. Right, so I want to make it a little bit bigger and higher, so I'm going to modify the width and height. Give it a width of 150 pixels, and also give it a height of 55 pixels. So I'm doing things in stages rather than doing all the formatting at once. To do it in little stages to make sure each thing works correctly. So there we go, it's got bigger and higher, but the colors aren't right, obviously. So I'll give it some color. So it's a background. So background, and we want it to be a bluey color, and this is the code for a blue color, 0083A9, and then we'll see if that's worked. Yep, it's now blue. Nothing happens when we hover over it, but we'll address that in a minute. And then I want to make the font bold, so it's a bit stronger, a bit more defined. So font, weight, bold. There we go, that's nice. Actually, I want to make it a little bit different. I want to make the font a bit bigger. I'm going to make it 20 pixels. We just go font size, 20 pixels, and this should make it bigger. There it is. It's nice now, but it doesn't change color when I hover, so we now need to put the hover effect in. And the easiest way to do that is to copy all of this that we've just done for the button, paste it below, then we just go hover at the end there, and now that is a hover effect for this. So this and this wants to be the same, but the background color needs to change when you hover over it. That's basically the only thing we want to change. So we want to make it a lighter blue color, and the code for a lighter blue color is 00A7D7. And if you want to get some colors to use for styling, you just type into search engine, Google for example, CSS colors, and you will get some web pages that show you some different color codes for doing different colors. There we go, hover over it and it turns a light blue, and that's great. And we're almost done here, but one thing I've noticed is these fields are taller than these fields, so we need to go and address that. So we need to put a little bit of height in this email and age field, which we'll go ahead and do now. So we go back in here, and because we've commented, labeled it nicely, we know this is our email field. So we just put a height in. We'll try 55 pixels. And this should actually just affect this one. It shouldn't affect this one. And it hasn't done anything, because actually hasn't done anything, but actually what we're doing, we're targeting this whole area here rather than just a field. So we can target just a field by, I'm going to remove that because we don't need that there, but to target just an email field, we can copy this code here, and we just need to add to the end of it input square brackets and type equals email, close square bracket, and that is just targeting now this specific email field. So it's not touching this part, so it's not touching the title or label, only this input field area. So we want that to have a height of 55 pixels. See, now it's got a tiny bit bigger, but this one hasn't because we haven't targeted that, so we'll do that now. And we can use the same trick again, but this time targeting the drop down rather than email, and this time we can just write the word select because it's a select field, and that should target that select field area. If we refresh it now, that should get bigger, which it has done, and that's great. One final thing I want to do here is, I think these labels here are a bit large, the font in these labels is a bit large, so I want to make that a little bit smaller. So I'm going to target those labels and just make the size smaller. To do that, I'm going to say in this section, because it is doing this fields, we're going to target the label, and it's pretty much exactly the same code. So I'm just going to copy that, save as templating again, but instead at the end it's got G field underscore label because it's targeting the label. I just want to change the font size, so font size, and then we'll say 18 pixels to see how that looks. Quite a lot. This is trial and error, so you can play around. So just update that style sheet. Now when we refresh, these labels on these fields should get smaller, which they have, and I think it looks neater. So there you go. So I'm happy with that. So now we want to go next, to go on to our next page, and then we want to show our styling. Okay, so now we push next to go on. So I need to fill in these fields here, otherwise we'll get an error. Actually, I'll show you. So if I don't fill in the fields and just push next, you get this field error. This is required field. So get rid of that and refresh the page again. So I'm going to fill these in. I'll put my name. Actually, did you notice I scanned past it, but I was in here and I pushed tab and it's jumped up here. It says skip to toolbar, which is a bit strange. We want it to actually go into this box here when you push tab on your keyboard. And this is a problem with Gravity Forms, and we can fix that with another bit of code. And I'll show you how now. And what we need to do is we need to go into the functions of our theme. So we go back to our editor window, and this time I'll go theme functions. So it's on the right here. So it's a functions.php file. So just click that. You've got to be careful when editing this file, because if you make an error in the code, it can crash your site, and you will need FTP access to sort it out. But I'm confident that this code here will not crash the site. I'm going to start off with a comment just so I know what I'm doing. So this is Gravity Forms control tab order, because it's the order when you push the control tab on your keyboard. And what you need to do is do add filter and then bracket, quotation marks, and then g form underscore tab index. Make sure you copy this correctly if you do it, because again your site may crash if you don't. And then you go underscore, you need the ID of your form, and so ours is 10, yours will probably be different. More quotes, comma, space, and then create function underscore function, brackets, quote, quote, comma, then quote, return, space 4, semicolon, quote, bracket, bracket, semicolon. Okay, so make sure you write this correctly, otherwise it may crash your site, and then put your form ID in here. So I'm going to update that. My site didn't crash, I didn't get a white screen here. I'm going to go back to my CSS style sheets for later on. Back down to where we styled it. But now I'm going to refresh my page. I'm going to put my name in here again. I'm going to push tab on my keyboard now. You see it jumped straight to that second field now, which is great. So it's a bit annoying that Gravity Forms does that, but that little bit of code will sort it out. My surname, my email, neil@neilcurtis.me, so that's what you can use if you want to contact me. Then select my age range, which is 25 to 40, then next. And here we go onto our next page. So remember we had that one radio button field that we haven't done anything with yet, and then we've got previous and submit. Oh no, we can go ahead and style this page back here, and then I'm going to put a comment area ready for our code to go in to style this radio button field. Style the form radio buttons. But before I do anything there, we need to go back into this page, and then here we've got our radio button field. This is going to be a question. So I'm going to go edit. I'm going to tick required field, because it's going to be a required field. So it's going to be our question, so it can be anything you want, but I'm just going to pretend I'm some service provider. So I'm going to say, how do you rate our service, question mark, and then the choices are going to be poor, slightly different to my example I showed at the start, but it doesn't matter. Poor, okay, good. So I'm going to have 3 fields in here. You could have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 10, or anything you wanted, but I'm just going to have these 3 fields. Update that. And then refresh my page, and you'll see what we've done reflected here. How do you rate our service? Poor, okay, good. Right, so what I'm going to do is style this. I want these to be in a line here. So instead of in a list beneath each other, I want to go poor, okay, good, in a line. So we'll go ahead and sort that now. So we go back to our CSS styling and go down to where we put that comment, and then we need to write in some code to target these radio button fields list, remember, because I'm in a list at the moment. So same as normal, I'll write it in again, body hash g form underscore wrapper underscore 10 for the form ID, dot g form underscore body, dot g form underscore fields, dot g field underscore radio, because it's a radio button, and then because we're targeting a list, because we don't want to be a list beneath each other, we want to be in line, go li, open and close curly brackets, and then first of all we'll do that, display inline, update. So hopefully now these will just go next to each other. Bang, which you do, which is fantastic. Right next to each other, really close. I want to put a bit of padding or margin between them just so they spread out a bit, and I'm actually going to do a bit of padding here, I think. It's padding, and then I'm going to go 5 pixels, so 5 pixel padding all the way around. Got a feeling I may need the word important, but I won't put it in now, just in case I don't need it. It's best not to use that, you know, overwrite exclamation mark important if you can get away with it. I'm not getting this confirm your submission because I'm refreshing the second page of our form, so it doesn't really like it, but I'll just push OK. And that hasn't done much, really. I don't think it's done anything, so we'll put this word exclamation mark important. Nothing. That's because I've made a mistake. I wish I did it on purpose, but I didn't. I put a semicolon instead of a colon here. So I just take something small like that and the code won't work. There we go. It's padded it out a bit. Right, so what do we want to do now? I want to change the hover effect. So remember, if you, an example, when I hovered over it, these turned yellow. So I will do that now. And like we did with the button, I'm just going to copy all this, what we've got already, paste it, but this time I'll put colon hover, oops, without the space. And that is going to be the hover effect. We'll just get rid of all this because it's going to take the same formatting from here, but we just need to change the color. Background, and then the color for a yellowy color, I want to go yellowy this time, FFBE00. Semicolon. Nothing's changed because remember it's hover effect, and then when I hover, nothing happens. I'm going to put this important again. Okay, so that's the problem. Which it was. There you go now. When you hover over it, it changes colour. I might push them apart a little bit because I think they're a little bit too tight, so they'll just quickly lead onto each other there. So I'm going to put a little bit of space in between them. So I'm going to do margin actually. So I'm going to go up this top part, margin right, and then I'm going to say 10 pixels. Just spread them out a bit. I'm going to put important because I'm pretty sure on these margins it generally needs you to put the word important. Here we go, they spread out a bit now, bit of a gap between them, just so you don't accidentally click the wrong one. Great, and that works nicely. So I'm going to put all the other questions in there, but if you remember in the example there was conditional logic where they only showed these options once you'd already selected one. So you work your way down the list, but we'll sort that out later. Now I'm just going to put 4 different questions in just so we've got them there. So I'll go back to my form, and here I'm going to call this one 1 because I forgot this is the first question. And I'm going to duplicate it this time, so you just click duplicate here. You see we've got it now, so I don't need to bother with this part again. I just need to change this to, and then what is the quality of our content, just as a 1, and then I'll duplicate this one. Question 3, we'll put, how do you rate the quality of our work? And then another one, just making something up here, just so we've got 4 questions. How was your project? Right, so 3 just made up questions there, so I'll update this form. So now we should get 4 questions next to each other, although actually they probably won't be formatted right because we haven't sorted it. They're not. They go next to each other, which actually looks alright, but I don't want that. I want them underneath each other. And you'll notice that the longer question here stacking under itself, and that's because it's taking the 280 pixel width from another setting we've already done and making it squash, so we need to sort that out. Of course, we do all that in the CSS. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to give this its own unique CSS class ID, just so we can target this one specific kind of field. So remember, right at the beginning, we set the width and other properties using this code here of individual elements. So we want to use that same code, but I'll get rid of this in here because we want to change that now. But because we want to target a specific part, so we can give it a specific class ID, so you just push dot at the end and we can give it a name. So we can make up anything, but this is a questionnaire field. So it's a questionnaire field, so we'll just give it a name of that. It can be anything you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this name and I'll update this. I haven't done any styling yet, but I'm going to copy that name. And because we want it in these questionnaire fields, if you open this up in the advanced section of these radio button fields, and all the other ones as well, there's a CSS class name. That's what we just created. Paste that in there. I'll do it with all 4 fields. So I should have done this before I duplicated them all, but we've only got 4, so it's not too bad. Update that. So now I basically just said these 4 different elements here. I've got that specific class ID in there, so whatever I put should style these. So what do we want to do? We want to give them a width of 100% to start with, because like I said, this is stacking beneath itself, but it's only 280 pixels, so I'll make it a width 100%. So in theory, and refresh this, it should change the styling. And straight away they're stacked underneath each other, so that's great. And even this has gone below. And the reason it's done that is because even though this field only looks this big, actually, if I do this, you'll see it goes all the way across the page. And that's fine because you can't see it. And it's good enough for us here. So what I want to do with this now is, if you remember, when you first come to this questionnaire part, it only showed you the first one, so you had the first options, and the rest you saw the question but you couldn't select it until you'd answered the one above. So we'll do that now, and the way we do this is through conditional logic. So if we go back to our form here, we've got 4 questions, okay? So we open actually we don't want to touch the first one because that one's always showing. We'll open up the second one, and if you go to advanced, so at the bottom here we've got this conditional logic section, so you just tick that and get these options. So you've got options to show or options to hide depending on some event. So we want to show ours, so this means now we've got that check that it'll be invisible until something happens. And I'm going to say if any of the next events happen. So show this field if any of the next events happen. And we want it is when someone selects one of these options here from this section, then show the one beneath. So this is how do you rate our service. So how do you rate our service? And it's poor. So I'm going to do how do you rate our service? Okay. How do you rate our service? Good. So that means when someone selects any of these three options for this field, it will show this one. I'm going to update that. Let's refresh this now. Remember, I've only done it to this number 2, so these three won't change. There we go. So you see I've got 1, 3, 4, I've got number 2, but as soon as I select something here, number 2 shows up, which is great. So I'm going to do it for these other 2 fields now. Advanced, conditional logic. If any of these things happen and if someone fills out number 2, so when someone fills out number 2 as poor, okay, or good, then show this field. And finally, the last one, conditional logic. So show when someone fills out this field. So show this 4th question after someone has answered any one of the options for question 3. So I'll update that. So now when you come to this page, when you've got one option, so you have to select something. And you select something and number 2 shows up. Select the number 3, number 4, you can go. So that's great. But if you remember, I'm going to refresh this page again so we go back to its original form. If you remember, this in our first example was large writing, and then you saw the other questions in small writing, and when you selected one, the small writing became big and you had the options. So we could do that now by adding some HTML fields and making them show or disappear depending on certain things. So that's what we'll do. Well, first of all, we make this big. So we'll have this question in big font because that's what we want to do. And that is done by targeting the label of this particular field, and we can write in this code here. I won't bother writing it out again. So this is sort of standard code, and then you want to target the label, so it is .g field underscore label, but we don't want to target all the labels in all the form. In fact, we've already done that previously here. So actually this code should be the same. So we're targeting, saying we want in font size 18, which this is in this label here. So actually I didn't have to write that out again, I could have just pasted that in. So this is what we want. So I actually wrote it in a little bit wrong. So this is targeting the label, but we don't want all of them, we only want some of them. And this means we can put in this CSS class name. So remember, each one of these has already got, if you go into advanced, this questionnaire field is a CSS class name. So we can say only target the field labels of that particular class. And you put it in here next to G field, so dot questionnaire. So that means it's only targeting the labels of anything with a CSS class of this name. Hope that's not too confusing. But basically it's only targeting those, so we want it to be a bigger font size, 30 pixels, and then I'll save that. So now this should be big font, which it is. And I want to show you something else. I'm going to minimize this so it's small, okay? And you'll see when I do that, this goes over 2 lines. And this is what it'll be like on a smartphone or a mobile device, and this gap's too big here. So we can sort that out by targeting the line height, which is what we need to target. And then we'll say 20 pixels. I'll minimize this, and then if I refresh the page again, the gap here should change. Which it does. See, it's nice and tight now, which is a lot better. Which is great. Right, so if I do these now, all of the headings should be large because they've all got the same class in it, which they are. But we don't want that, so I'll refresh this again to go back. What I want to show now is the 3 other questions, so question 2, 3 and 4, but in smaller font and without these options. And I only want to see the big font with the options when you click one of these here. And we can do that with what are called HTML elements in our form. So if you look here on our standard fields, we've got these HTML elements, and they're really useful for doing different things, but here we're just going to show some words. So I'll click it, and it just creates an HTML block, and this is going to be our other questions. So I'm just going to copy this question here, so I'm going to give it a title, HTML block for question 2, and this is what it shows here. So show this, update. And there we go, straight away it's there. But like before, it's taking the default styling, which is a width of 280 pixels, so we need to give it its own class and say we want it to be width 100%, so it doesn't go over 2 lines like this. And when it does, we want it to have a smaller line height. So we can go into our code, and then I'm going to give it a new comment here because it's not the radio buttons anymore, it's HTML elements. And the code we can use is, we can copy this first bit again, all the way to here, but this time we want to only target the specific class of, we'll call it HTML. Okay, and then when we format it, we want it to have a width 100%. And hit 20 pixels if it does go over 2 lines. So I'm going to update that. And we go into here, and we need to go to the advanced section, and in the CSS class name it was HTML. Update. So hopefully this will sort this out, which it hasn't. So I'm going to check my code, and I see straight away I've missed a semicolon off the end. It's like before, just tiny little things, mistakes, and it doesn't work, which is fair enough. And there you go, that's worked. Actually, this font's a bit big, so I want to make that a bit smaller. We'll say 16 pixels. But this is going to show still, so if I go OK here, big writing comes, but this one still shows. But so we need to use conditional logic to make this disappear as this one shows. So I'll refresh this page to get rid of what we've done. So this is in the conditional logic, so straight down here, and then advanced, then enable conditional logic. So this time we want to hide it because it's already showing if this is question 1 is any of these answers. Alright, so now when I click one of these, this should disappear and then a big writing should come for the next question. So it does, fantastic. So we can go ahead quickly and do the other ones. Because we've set this one all up nicely, I'm just going to duplicate it once, twice, okay, and then this next one is, I'm going to say this. And actually I'm going to put an asterisk because it is a required field. And I'll put an asterisk on this one as well, just to be consistent. And then the last one is this. Alright, and then the conditional logic needs to change. So this one we want to hide, not when question 1 is filled out, but when question 2 is filled out. And then when you change these all go back to the first option, so you need to remember to change them all back. And this final conditional logic is when number 3 is filled out, we want to hide it. Okay, so update that. So this should, in theory, finish this part, and all that's left is to style these buttons. Refresh my page just so those latest changes take effect. Right, there we go, nice. So we've got question 1, how do you rate our service? Poor, okay, good. Then we've got the 3 other questions, but we can't do anything in a small font. So we've got okay, number 2 shows, okay, number 3 shows, okay, number 4 shows. Brilliant. So I'm very happy with that, and I want to change the styling of these 2 buttons here, and this is pretty straightforward because we've already done it for the next one. So here we go to our form buttons. See, this is why it's nice to have these commented areas to know what's happening. I'm going to copy this top one, paste it in there, and then instead of calling it next, it's going to be the previous button. Actually, I should copy this one here. Hover effect. We'll call that previous. Refresh this. There we go, nice. We've got a nice big blue previous button. So now we need to do the submit button, and for this, I'm going to copy them both this time. We just need to remove the word previous, and then that targets the main submit button. Which is great. But I don't want it down there, I want it next to it. I want a little bit of a gap, and I want it to be a yellowy colour and not a bluey colour, which is easy enough to do, and we should know how to do this now because we've done it a few times. The reason it's going below is because we've got this clear both, so I'll get rid of that clear both because we don't want to clear it both. And what we actually want is a margin left. Actually, I'm going to put a margin right on the one above. Of 10 pixels. I'm going to put important because from the past it's shown that we need it for these margins. Copy that, put it in the one above because we need both the hover. Oh, I put it in the wrong place here. Sorry about that. I was supposed to be targeting. Oh, no, that was right. This one's wrong. I need to put this in the previous sections. Sorry about that. So I've got it in the normal previous button and then also the hover previous button. Put a margin right. There we go, nice. So we're just going to change this to a yellow and then a lighter yellow when you hover over it, and then it's done. So it's these two buttons here, and it's this color we need to target, and this one here. So the yellow is actually the same yellow as we used before for when you hovered over the different options, so I'll show you. So it's this yellow here that we want, which was FFBE00, and then when you hover over it we need to change it, and a hover lighter yellow is FFD96C. Update, refresh this. Great. Hover over it, changes. Maybe not the best color, but that's what we were going for. And actually, one final thing I want to do is I want to put a bit of a bigger gap here. It's a bit tight. Let's do all these. It's all right, but I want to put a little bit of a bigger gap. So I can do this in here. So it says margin right, but I want to change that to margin top. I'm going to give it 30, see what that looks like. And then I'll put it in here as well. I might not have needed it in there, but and also in this main submit button. So basically what I've done there is said put a margin top on this button and a margin top on this button, 30 pixels. So hopefully that'll push these further down to has. You see there's a bigger gap there now. That's nice there. So finally what I want to put is, we've got these asterisks here, but we haven't actually said what those mean. So I'm going to put another HTML element and say asterisk means this is required field. So back to our form, HTML element, HTML element, and then here is it. They always go to the bottom when you do a new one. So I'm going to drag this one up to above all of these fields. So it's going to go in here, and then it's going to be called field, and this is what shows now in the content. So asterisk indicates a required field. So this now should show up here at the top. So it has, but I don't like the font size or the weight, so I'm just going to do a little bit of styling of that. So we go down to our HTML element styling, and then we've got all this here, so we just copy that again. This time it's going to have a different one, so we can call it to or required. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's just going to have its own unique styling. Open and close curly brackets as normal, and want it to be smaller font of 14 pixels, which is pretty small. But I want to give it a font weight of bold to make it darker. And I'm going to leave it as that for now, but we'll see how that looks. But I may need to do some more styling. Refresh that. Nothing's happened. And of course nothing's happened because I didn't put this in here. So it was HTML required, which is this class name. Now refresh this. Here it is, it's small and dark. Just going to put a little bit more of a margin there, just to spread it out a bit, just to make this stand out a little bit more. Just going to put margin. Margin bottom of 30 pixels, and then important. There we go, so that's basically just about finished. I do, just to make this more obvious, I'm going to put a tiny bit of margin on the left hand side to push it across so it's not tight against the edge. And we can do that quite easily by targeting a wrapper for this field, for this form. I'm just going to copy this comment again. I'm going to put this right at the very top of our styling because it's actually the first bit of styling for the biggest bit of styling we're going to do, because for the whole form rather than individual elements. So styling the form wrapper, which is basically this whole form and also the previous page. So we want to do that. Now if I click previous now, it should go back to the previous page, which is great. So again, we want this to be indented a little bit. We can do that by targeting the form wrapper. So this is a shorter bit of code because it's only the first part. So body #g form __10, and that's all it is because it's targeting the wrapper. So each one of these other ones is go through different stages. It targets the wrapper, then the body, then the fields, and then individual fields. But in this case, just the wrapper. And we're just going to say margin left of 5% of the screen. So that's going to push it. And the reason I use percentage rather than a pixel size is because the smaller the screen size, the less of a gap on the left, which is good. So it means it looks better on mobile devices, and I'll show you in a minute. Refresh that, and this should indent, which it has. Maybe a bit too much, but that's fine for this study. We haven't got required fields here, so we can easily do that. So this is a required field, HTML. So I've duplicated that, and I'll just drag that right up to the top. Update. There we go. But because of the styling of these fields, these are actually floating left relative to this. But if I make this 100% rather than just being a small area, it should knock these down. I'll go right down to my required wrapper, and I'll just put a width of 100% just so we see we want it to fall width of the screen, so that means there's no room for anything to float next to it. Great. So this is it, basically finished. And if I minimize this again, you'll see that gap as I stretch it out. That gap changes. Now when it reaches a certain size, the elements stack. So this gap here, we used a percentage. So instead of saying a default pixel width, it actually percentage of the screen. So as the screen gets smaller and smaller, that gap to the edge gets smaller and smaller. Don't know if you can see that clearly, but it does. Right, so that's it. So we're finished. So we go next. Actually, I'm going to go previous. I'm going to bump a bigger gap here like we have on the other ones. So we go to our next buttons, which are here, these two fields, and then we'll just copy this margin top and paste it in here. And then we really are finished with the formatting of this form. Because this is quite a long tutorial, but I've gone quite slowly through the different stages. But in about an hour or so we've done it. So there we go, fill in your names, next. Answer this, bang, 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 and submit. But when we click submit now, it's just going to give us a default message. So before I do that, I'm going to go into my form. I'm going to go form here, then confirmations. And you see, it's going to say, thanks for contacting us, get in touch. But I don't want to do this. I want to send someone to a page rather than this message. So we go ahead and create a new page. So it's a new window so we don't lose that one we're on. This is going to be our thank you for completing the questionnaire. So thank you for your completion. Let's write a message. Okay, so just a little message there. I'll make this full screen because I've got the Genesis theme here, Genesis framework. I've got these options. And I think I've got titles turned off, so I'll put this between an H1 tag. This was big. Publish this. So now on our confirmation page, we edit this. I'll say take us to a page when someone completes it, and it's this new page you just set up. So if I click submit now, it should forward me straight to that new page. Here we go. Thank you so much for taking this questionnaire. We'll use our service. So that's it. So that's our Gravity form, how to make and style a questionnaire type form for your WordPress website. If you head over to my website at www.neilcurtis.me, I have a dedicated Gravity Forms tutorial page, so how to format and style Gravity Forms. And on here I have lots of individual Gravity Forms tutorials doing things such as styling and formatting the asterisks on your required fields, or the label or header of your fields, or your individual elements, and all sorts of individual forms. So on each of these is click on them and you have a little bit of information about the code and then a video showing you how to do this. And also over here I have some bigger how-to tutorials. For example, this one here showing you how to get user-generated content on your website using Gravity Forms. Then I have large tutorials like this one showing you how to style Gravity Forms. So if you want to have a look at another one, styling a complete form like this, I have this video over here. Also on this YouTube channel, if you subscribe to it, you will get to hear about new videos as soon as they happen. So click on this icon link on the top corner of the screen and make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below this video or over on my website.